If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Elaine, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 301 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. That's right, episode 301. We're now barreling towards episode 600. We've crossed the halfway mark. Thanks for being here with us. To celebrate this milestone, we have not one, but two amazing comedians today. Steve Mittleman, been on The Tonight Show. He starred in Roxanne. He took on Rosie O'Donnell in Star Search. You love him. And John DeBellis, head writer for the acclaimed DC Follies, wrote and directed The Last Request, author of Stand Up Guys. I want to say this is an interview, but it's mostly me trying to get questions in while two good friends, John and Steve, have an amazing conversation about comedy that I was just honored to be in the room for. You're going to love it, and that's coming up in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, Butch Patrick, Eddie Munster, was here last week for episode 300. That's right, episode 300. We talked monsters and more. Do not miss that amazing episode. But right now, buckle up for Steve Mittleman and John DeBellis. Enjoy. All right, everyone. I have two special guests with me today, comedy legends. We have Steve Mittleman, winner of the show.
For himself.
Yeah. Showtime Laugh-Off champion. Been on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno and Johnny Carson, HBO. He's been everywhere. Honored to also have John DeBellis, head writer from...
Boo.
Head writer from the acclaimed DC Follies, wrote and directed The Last Request, writer on Saturday Night Live, and so much more. Welcome to the show,
Oh, my
Steve
God.
and
Thank
John.
you, Jeff, for having at least me. I don't know about John here.
I don't even know what to say.
You were that busy with guests that you had to merge your guests.
Actually, Steve, you're the first person to bring a friend.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Never add up to a whole guest, Steve. You need two to add up to at least one guest.
pretty nice. You know, you got two he-men here. That's who you have. He-Man.
What brings you two together?
Honestly, since 75 or 76?
76. You have to admit that publicly?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
I'm very much into self-shame.
Well, we met the summer of 76 at the Improv. I was waiting on line to audition, and John was, begging for money.
Which Steve, of course, didn't give me any.
I gave nothing because I was
I had 3 adopted kids with me, and they hadn't eaten in 7 weeks. You didn't care.
nothing. Go back to Jersey. That's what I said. Why don't you go back to Jersey?
Now, we've known each other actually a long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We started out, I guess, almost from the first day you started. I only started about a few months ahead of you.
I see that my first day of comedy was December 16th, 76. I don't really count that summer because I was, going back to school and, I just auditioned a bit. But I hung out at the clubs and watched people, and I learned from that summer from the Improv. And I'll tell you a story, John, I don't think you know, and Jeff, I'm sure you don't know. Judy Orbach, who used to, run the Sunday night audition nights, the Improv, 44th and 9th. There was a kind of a fishbowl, and you stuck your hand in and you picked a number, and that's your order for the show. It could be number 1 or number 40, or something, at 5 minutes each. And it was like 4 or 5 hour show. So whenever I picked it, she liked me, thought it was funny. And so I'd pick a number, like number 39, she got brought back in, and I picked number 28 or number 14, or, I'd pick a good number. She was very kind to me.
That was great. I mean, the first night I was there, my very first night, I had passed auditions at Catch, Rising Star. And that's where I met Larry David the first night.
Wow.
Richard Lewis took me over to the improvisation and told me to, Chris, you got to put this guy on,
That's good.
all up and right. But I met him, Glenn Super. I met all these guys, the Lane Boozler, Bob Shore, all that the first night. It was amazing. Amazing time. Belza.
That was all great.
Quite a list. Talk to me about Larry David.
Larry is like, I've known Larry from day one, like I said. What do you want to know about him? He's insane, but in a good way. What you see on Curb Your Enthusiasm is what Larry thinks. He wouldn't necessarily do, but it's what he's thinking.
I think it's a tempered, mellowed version of the real Larry.
A little bit, no. Tell you, Larry's just, he would spend, well, you were there. We have pictures of holidays at my house. Steve was there. Gilbert was there a lot.
Yeah. Everybody, all the wayward Jews, they needed a place for Christmas.
For Christmas, they'd go to my mother. My mother was a great cook, so we'd go back to my mother's house.
Oh, what I did for your parents one year for Christmas.
Yeah, he gave me an envelope with $1. Was it $5? You said $5 in it, right?
It was $5 each. I gave them each a $5 cash with a Christmas card.
Yeah, we didn't answer stuff about Larry. I mean, I have so many Larry stories. I mean, one of my favorites is you've heard this, Steve, the popcorn girl story.
What was that?
I go over his house one day. He called me up, John, you got to come over. So I drive up into his Laurel Canyon and we're hanging. And he goes, John, I met this girl, the popcorn girl, the thing. I'm in love with the popcorn girl. And I said, oh, great, Larry. He said, what do you think I should do? I said, I think, maybe you should write her a note or something like that. Yeah, and he writes a note. It was a very funny note. And says, for you, I'm prepared to give up meat and all this stuff, So we go over, we drive to the theater. And Larry parks his car and we walk. And he walks up to this guy, this really skinny young kid, weird looking kid, and says, I'm here. I'm looking for the popcorn girl. So the guy looks to Larry, so what do you want to talk to her for? I talked to the popcorn girl. She's not here. You know how he talks. Because she's not here. She's not, she's off tonight. He says, I got a note. Give a note to the popcorn girl. So we give it a note. So we get back in the car and we're driving away. And we pass the theater again. I said, Larry, I think they're in there reading a note. So we go into the theater. There's a bunch of 20-year-olds reading this note. And Larry goes, that's my note for the popcorn girl. And he's getting really a popcorn girl. And the guy turns around. You should be reading my note. There's a popcorn girl. And the guy turns around and goes, that's my girlfriend.
Oh.
Larry didn't know what to do. He turned all kinds of colors and just turned around and we drove off. I never saw him drive a car so fast in my life.
That's exactly a Larry scenario.
Oh, yeah. And we saved his life one time, too. He had gravity boots on. We hang upside down. Lucky he kept the phone down and by the ground because he couldn't get up. So me and my wife had to drive through Laurel Canyon trying to find his house. Is always difficult to find, even during the day when I knew where it was. But at night, trying to drive to his house. We got to his house. By the time we got there, a half hour later, his suit was red, totally beat red. And because he couldn't get up, he was stuck upside down. If we hadn't reached him, he would have been dead.
Yeah, that's crazy. You saved Larry David's life.
I think he'd pay me some money for that.
That is funny. You mentioned Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah.
I worked with him once.
A stand-up show or?
Yeah, a stand-up show. He was in town in Michigan and at a Magic Bag Theater, and I opened for him. He was a good dude. It's amazing how different he is backstage before he walks on stage.
Pretty mellow fellow.
Oh, yeah. He was so chill. And it was just like, it was right after he had gotten fired from Aflac with that whole thing.
The amazing thing about Gilbert, he was so talented that when he finally, the fetching old Jew character that he does at voice, when he finally kind of made it, could have made it 8 different ways. I mean, his material was funny. He didn't need the voice. But I remember going, oh my God, in my head, I'm going, this is what he chose to make it with. And he did a great career.
Great career.
So many, he was truly a comics comic. All the comics loved going in and watching Gilbert do his thing.
Did you know that Gilbert, when me and my ex-wife got married, we moved to L.A. and Gilbert, after I think we only married a couple of weeks, Gilbert lived with us for about a month and a half.
Wow.
2 months. He's the cheapest individual that ever lived.
Yeah.
Really, it's not a character. He's just incredibly cheap.
He's open about it, actually. He'll go to hotels and just take this shampoo and
the soaps and that stuff. One time he tells that story about how he bought a shirt in a thrift store downtown New York, and it was 30 cents or 40 cents or whatever. He didn't know if he should take it back or not. He was talking to his sister, and his sister was saying, I don't know, maybe you should wait and decide or whatever. So he finally decided he was going to take it back, and he got really pissed because he had gone back, and we had gone back. Either there was a fire or something. The store was destroyed. So he lost 40 cents because he couldn't bring his shirt back.
Oh my God. I don't actually, out of all the guys, he's a guy that I don't remember going out to eat with. You know what I mean? I mean, we were friendly.
No way.
You didn't want to pay to eat out.
No.
You know?
There's another story that they don't mind me telling the story. This is a typical Gilbert story. Me and Buddy, all of us were at the bar at Catch a Rising Star, and we still see Gilbert get in a car with the girl. Cab, okay? And we saw him, he paid for the cab, which blew our mind. So they go downtown. So he's apparently on the couch with this really hot girl, and he's making out with her, and they stop, right? And then she asks for money. What do you say? It gets freaking worse. So Gilbert's telling us this story, and we said, Gilbert, well, you've been really pissed. He goes, no. I said, because when we were moving around, I said, it must have shook a lot or whatever. He said, I picked up the cushions and I found a bunch of change.
That's classic. Wow. Yeah.
I'm sorry to eat up that story.
By the way, John wrote a tremendous book about the improv, and you can mention that. I mean, if
stand-up guys.
Stand-up guys, yeah.
It's a fun book.
Once I knew I was in it, I didn't read it, honestly. It's a great read, everybody.
Oh, thanks, Steve.
Oh, John, talk a little bit more about the book. Is it road stories? Is it just anecdotes, from the different
story? It's a memoir, but it's about how to become. The whole goal in the beginning of the book is really to become a heavyweight in the clubs. So you get to get your own spots. And it's about that process of working your way up through the clubs and the process and all the different kinds of people that were back then, all the different comics. And it was I wanted to bring a feeling of what it was like to be there, to be, with everybody and the fun that we had and just a good time feeling. I didn't badmouth anybody. I kept it just fun. And about everybody, though, bartenders, everybody.
It's a great, great, great book. It is a great, no, it was.
Thank you. No.
Yeah. Anybody that's interested in comedy and the formation of all these brilliant minds, we were very lucky. I have to say that there was no guarantee except we loved comedy. We loved laughing. We loved funny people. We loved developing, but there were no gigs back then. There were almost zero gigs. We did it because we didn't know comedy was going to boom. And there was going to be a renaissance.
Nobody knew that.
Nobody knew anything. We just knew we were like this cast of characters, and this was a home for us. And it was an amazing time for many, 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 many years. So
there will never be another time like that. We were lucky because comedy had been really lost. I mean, and the club scenes were dead. Everything was dead. So anybody that came up at the time came up because they loved it, and there wasn't an opportunity. We didn't even see an opportunity to make money.
Yeah, I'm not doing this to showcase myself for an acting career. People did comedy because they just grew up loving comedy, and they thought maybe I can do this.
Well, Bill Maher had that great statement about going into the clubs, and he said, remember they're going in there, and after being there a couple of days, whatever, one of his first thoughts and feelings is, wow, I'm around people just like me.
Yeah,
he always felt, as a comic, both you guys comics. That we always feel not like a lot of other people. We always have something that's a little different about us. And when you went into this club, it was just all 40 comics, 30 comics, just like yourself, neurotic, crazy, And
the camaraderie was insane. I felt that what he said, people just like me, except for you, John. That was the only person, the only one I went, nothing like this guy. Nothing.
What was Bill Maher like back then? Was he basically the same as he is now? It
was close. He knew he was very smart, among the smartest in the room. He was fairly confident in his abilities, and he was, if you call it rough around the edges, because we all were. And I think I kind of liken it to a sculpture. Your artistic voice. And then
knew the game a lot because his father was a network executive.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, for CBS and whatever ABC. Bill was not only very smart from going to an Ivy League school and all the other stuff, but he also knew more about playing the game, and he knew how to do it. He was shrewd.
Yeah.
To this day, he's very, respectful of the guys from our time period and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
You worked with him on Politically Incorrect for a while, didn't you?
Yeah. He's a good guy. Very compassionate towards comics. That's how I found him anyway.
Very much.
Most compassionate towards comics, well, you know this, is Rodney.
Rodney opened up a club at the Tropicana, and they've had many clubs around the country, as Jeff, as you know, I'm sure John knows. And I played a great deal of them, like with the casino, clubs and, all throughout the country. I've been probably every state or almost every state. And so Rodney opens up Rodney's place at the Trop. He's the only one in all these years, meals for the comics, $150 cash for the week for expenses, aside from what he was paying them. He's the only one in the history I can think of that did that. He's like, take care of the guys. Take care of the guys.
My mom was in Vegas, and we were a bunch of her girlfriends, and she calls me up, and she said, John, Rodney's in town in Vegas playing. And I said, why don't you just leave a note? Tell me my mother, leave a note. He'll get back to you. So Rodney not only gets back to where he gets a table right up front with 5 or 6 of her girlfriends, comps, Rodney pays everything. Middle of his set, he does his set. He does 2 or 3 jokes that I wrote in a row, and then he calls my mother. He says, hello, he stops the show and he says, I like you. That's 3 jokes I just did. Mr. DeBellis, please stand up. Her son wrote these jokes and stuff.
That's a great story.
And then afterwards, he went over and sat with them. You know how shy Rodney can be. He sat with all these women.
Yeah, he was awkward.
Awkward.
Unless he had a chance to score. Maybe he scored with your mom. We don't even know.
I will say you guys are the first comedians I've talked to reflecting on Rodney Dangerfield that didn't do it in his voice.
Oh, yeah, he does a good. You do a good Rodney, Steve.
I'll tell you, things are rough. I'll tell you a couple of Rodney stories. So every few months, I would get a call because I had like sort of what you call self-deprecating material, and once in a while, somebody would go in. They have these joke writing services, and they would go into the clubs. They lift a line, sell it to Rodney. And that Rodney would try out, and the joke, I would get a phone call from Rodney. Hey, Steve, how you doing? Hey, I'm good, Rodney. Yeah, I got this joke. They say it's your joke. I go, yeah, guess what? It is my joke. But I was trying to sell jokes to Rodney because back then, it was like $50 a joke. But still today, comics don't like to pay $50 a joke. That's 40 years later, 45 years later. And after like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 tries of trying to sell him a joke, I said, Rodney, it was... I was breastfed through a straw. I knew my mom hated me. I was breastfed through a straw. Anyway, and then I'm on, Rodney Dangerfield group, and they show clips of all this stuff. And then I finally went, oh, here's my joke. I got to hear him do my joke.
That's awesome.
Well, it's somewhere around 1980, early 80s. I was visiting Seinfeld and Ship in LA. And spontaneously we go, let's drive to Vegas. We drive to Vegas. We get there. We see, I think it's at the Sands, Rodney Dangerfield. And we all knew and loved Rodney, and he knew us. We go, let's go. We tell the woman, hey, we're friends. We're comics from New York. She got us a seat in the back, like a booth in the back. Then at the end of the show, we had blast watching the show. And we had seen him, endless times at the clubs in New York and hung out with him. We asked, where's Rodney go after the show? They go, he comes out and says hi to people after the show. We go and he goes, hey, boys, how you doing? My road manager left. You can take his room. Then we had like meals with him. We put us up for a couple of days. And we saw that weekend, we saw Steve Martin. We saw Freddie Roman and Cher. We saw David Brenner. We saw like 4 comics in 48 hours.
Wow.
And then we drove home. It was like an amazing education, and we had so much fun. And it was all spontaneous trip, 2 days.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have to take a quick break. I do want to thank everyone for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back with Steve and John. I would have loved to have seen Steve Martin live.
Oh, amazing. He was the Beatles. Truly, I worked with him on a couple of movies. His response from the audience is why he left comedy. He could just go, hello, or whatever, however he did it. Wild and crazy guy. And then he'd have like an hour and 20 minutes of laughs, but he didn't feel like he had any input. It was just, point and laugh because of this famous guy you're seeing.
That's what happens, yeah.
Yeah. kind of like, he was like the Beatles of comedy for X amount of years. Sung, that one time in Vegas, but one time at the Miami High Life Fontan. I think it's called Fontan. Anyway, and they had a concert in there and everybody's jammed in. And the laughter was insane. It was insane. This is in the mid-70s, visiting my parents down in Florida. And it was just, the laughter was so crazy. It was like nothing I've ever seen.
Well, the funniest guy I ever saw in person for me, and I still don't know why I laugh. I can't even tell you why I laugh. It was Andy Kaufman.
Loved him.
I would cry when I saw Kaufman and Andy. And I don't even know why I had no idea why I was laughing.
Well, it's so...
It's a joke. It's just this weird, whatever he does, that persona that he did would just make you, all of a sudden, you can't help it. You don't want to laugh because he gets you angry and then he makes you laugh so hard. Stop.
I know.
Never seen anything like him. It blew my mind.
Watching him, I don't know if I ever met him. I think I nodded hello to him, that's about it. Buddies with Bob Zamuda. So when I used to sneak in because I'm tall, when I was like 17, I would sneak into the clubs and watch, some either from in high school, I'd go with friends. I was very lucky. They just let me in. One Saturday night, there's this British MC. We're talking, it had to be like 1972 or something. This British MC the whole night. Thank you, Mr. Friedman, for allowing me to, be the master of ceremonies tonight. And he whole show, blah, 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 blah. And I'm telling you, 20 years later, I went, Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
I did not know it was Andy. It crystallized out of nowhere. Like Andy Kaufman. It was Andy Kaufman. I had no clue.
The Improv hated when he worked the door because he would come in and work the door sometimes. And Judy would say he would answer the phone and people would make reservations. And he'd keep putting him through to other people, but it's him with different accents. And they wouldn't get any reservations because he just keep putting him through to different people.
That's so funny.
And he was Elaine Boozer's first love. And
yeah, big time. She's still very fond of.
Yep.
Yeah,
Very
fond.
by the way. She's one of the greatest people.
The greatest. And a Met fan. Let's go, Mets.
Yeah, Elaine is wonderful.
Let's go, Mets.
You guys are so funny. All right, Elaine Boozler. Talk to me about Elaine Boozler.
She's very welcoming, sweet, good-natured, well-meaning, decent, sweet soul.
She showed me the ropes. She was going to pass me. Actually, Bob Shaw passed me auditions. But then the next night I met Elaine, and Elaine took me under her wing from day one and told me what to do, told me to hang out at the clubs even when you don't have to come on. She showed me all the tricks.
That would have to be day 2, not day 1. That's I'm trying to correct your recollection.
Oh, well, whatever. Day 2 then. I told my first joke to Elaine. First joke I ever saw.
What joke?
Elaine Boozer. You know you're getting fat when you step on your dog's tail and he dies. First joke ever. I wrote it in the bar.
It's ironic because she's such a dog lover.
Yeah, that's true.
She's
great,
a lovely
though.
soul. Yeah.
Let's talk about Rosie O'Donnell.
Part of my claim to fame is I beat her on
Star Search.
Yeah. And she
did. Oh, wow.
There's a story behind the story of Star Search with me. But so she had won like 10, 11 weeks in a row. And even though it was like 2 minutes of material when you did stand up on the show, when I beat her, she held my hands and backstage. She said, "Oh, thank God, I run out of material like 3 weeks ago." She had the personality that, I think sometimes people have the personality, they're fun, enrolling, whatever you want to call it. And it was her time to be discovered. And that weekly exposure did like wonders for her. I don't know if she went on to win the whole season. She definitely had and then I lost the next week. So I'm going to tell you the story. John knows a bit about my neurotic parents.
Oh, yeah.
And I was telling him a story about my mom today. But so my parents, they weren't supportive. They didn't know how to be supportive. So I won and everybody was happy. I won and they thought I was going to move on and onward and upward on Star Search. And I thought so. Even the producers thought so. But I lost the next week to Ken Ober. May he rest in peace. Funny guy. Even Ken said to me backstage, he said, "Oh, I would have voted for you. I thought you won." And so I lost. And I never heard a word of consolation from my parents. You feel like, well, son, I wish you had won, but bravo, you beat Rosie and, you're doing well in your career and so on and so on. So after a week of nothing, and I'm kind of boiling over with like, they don't call. And So I finally called them and I got my dad on the phone. I go, it really would have been nice if I got some kind of sweet message from you guys or a call or anything from you guys after losing, because I was disappointed. And he literally said, Mom didn't like your material.
Oh my God.
Oh, man.
Tell him
Imagine that.
you got one better than that, though. Tell him when you did
God,
Roxanne.
you remember that. My parents were in the Gilbert category of thriftiness, but my parents lived through the Great Depression and they both had their own sad stories around it to defend them a little bit. But this is bad. So I do Roxanne with Steve Martin. It's like a 10-week shoot. I'm like the 6th lead in the movie. It's a hit movie. It was Entertainment Tonight. They did the premiere at some, Groman's or something. I walked the red carpet. I'm on Entertainment Tonight. It's now the next day and it's Thursday. It's going to open on Friday. I called my parents just to make sure they know, hey, this movie is going to be a hit. It's going to be well received. And Steve Martin and Daryl Hannah. And, I have a big role in the movie. And my dad goes, well, we're going to wait for it to get to the Dollar Theater. Imagine. I was not surprised, but it was shocking that my parents were wackadoo. And it was more sickness than anything. Look how spiritual I am.
And they also had taste, probably.
How emotionally evolved I am.
You'd think Jewish parents would recognize, their boy grew up to be a nice Jewish comedian.
Yeah, I know. There's one other story like that. My whole family was down in Florida for something, maybe on my parents' anniversary. And so Coco and her husband, Benny, were there, and Jay and Barb, my sister-in-law. So Coco's my sister and my husband and my parents, and it was the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale. And I just destroyed, but they were further enough back with the lights in your eyes that, club lights, you can't see people. It's better that way when you have family there. But I killed. I never heard a word from my parents, of course, never heard a word. I just remember I was telling my brother and sister this. They said, oh man, Dad, he was pounding the table laughing so hard, but he could not tell me.
Oh yeah, wow.
Heartbreaking that way, but I realize I'm powerless over others. And honestly, I think that's their loss. It was my loss a bit, but that's their loss, not having the ability to express that.
Definitely their loss. The moment to be able to fell over your child, that's not something you should pass on.
When I told my grandfather I was going to go to college, yeah, it's good. Yeah, there's stupider kids than you went to college.
I remember that line. Yeah. So, John, I don't know if I told you this, but we lived, Creedmoor Mental Hospital.
Yeah, I've fantasized about that place many times.
It's like what I'm going to tell you really happened. We actually, when we were really young, they were, building parts of it, there were giant mounds of dirt. My friends and I, would sneak in. We would sneak into mental hospital. We literally, among the mental patients and everything, we would sneak in.
Why?
Because they had these giant mounds of dirt. It was fun. It was near us. It tells you about my childhood, my family, that we would sneak into a mental hospital. Like once a month, people would escape there. They literally had to manage the booby wagons, like looking for a mental patient.
Weren't you afraid that they'd actually commit you?
Yeah, I was afraid. My brother and sister, who are older, they would go, "Ooh, they're going to come to get you." And they had that sound, they're coming to take you away, right? I would hide under my bed. I was so thin and small, I would hide under my bed.
Wow.
Yeah, but we used to sneak in to a mental hospital. That's how crazy my family was. Nothing seemed wrong about it either. It seemed like the perfect place for me.
It is. It's
my home away from home.
There.
Yeah.
Now we're at the point in the age now when you're with a girl, she says, when you go to my place, your place or the home.
I know. Yeah. You want to go back to my place? And she goes, we are in your place already. What do you mean?
John, talk to me about writing for Saturday Night Live.
That was not great. I wasn't crazy about it, to be honest. It was a lot of work and it wasn't as wild as I thought it would be as far as to create creatively. Television in general is not, there's only a few shows I had fun on. One was with my boss was, I forget the name of the show, was Paul Haggis. Paul Haggis wrote $1 Million Baby. He wrote a couple of Bond movies. He won an Emmy for it was Crash. He directed Crash. And I work on a show with him, and it was so much fun. We'd come in about 11, and he'd say, okay, just getting here. Time to go out and buy CDs. So we go out and buy music, and then we'd come back, And it was wild. We just had a party. We wouldn't even work. He's dancing, putting music on. He's dancing on top of tables and stuff like that. And finally, about 4:00, he decided to write. We'd have with
Nice.
Leonard Cohen playing on the
Oh,
stereo.
really? Wow. That's fun.
He was the greatest guy. Just
That's good. That's fun.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I'm looking at you where you say, I think we're both laughing
I'm
at
only
you.
sitting. Can you hear me just as well, by the way?
No.
No, really? Wow. Oh, it's not even because my back was hurting. I'm sitting. That's why.
All right. I'll ask John some questions. Well,
Oh, no, all right.
give your back a break.
Okay, go. Why not? I don't mind. I've talked.
We'll go back. Talk to me about Fred Willard and DC Follies.
Oh, man, there's another great guy. What a great
He's
guy
great.
Willie was.
Loved him.
You love him. He's not only so funny, but he was so quiet,
Very.
so shy. And he would come up to you with a script. And I'm not exaggerating. He would actually say, can I take the out, place it with ah? He was so respectful. And then he had a wife. His wife, she's wonderful. We wrote this really, really dirty sketch for the rap party with Nixon playing with his balls, and Fred didn't want to read it because it was so dirty. And his wife made him read it, said she had to read it. And we blew the place down. And Marty Sidcroft would not come on after us because it was after Fred and with the puppet with Nixon. Fred is wonderful.
I did Roxanne with him. He was great.
Baseball fan too. And Elvis.
Yeah.
He loved Elvis. Loved baseball.
John, we got to try. I know this is an off track, Jeff, but there's a show about Elvis in Simi Valley. Somebody finds out he's alive. They interview him, and it's a show about that. So maybe we could find that show. It'd be a lot of fun. The guy plays Elvis as if he never died, as if he did like a JFK or a Andy Kaufman thing. Good premise.
That is a good premise. That sounds really, really interesting.
Great. Very, very quiet, but really funny. I used to do I used to let him and John Rourke, who used to do the Reagan puppet, I would let them ad lib at the end of the show. And then I would cull it down, put it up again, and then I would let them ad lib more off of what they did. And he was so funny.
Yeah.
I interviewed Jim Pittick, and we were talking about the scene from Best in Show that they did together when they were they were doing the dog show.
Oh, what a great show that was.
I was going to mention the Christopher Guest movies, and you just mentioned, he's insane. Guffman, brilliant.
Guffman,
Best in Show, great.
Best show, he stole the whole show.
Yeah.
I thought he was amazing.
I'd like to see it. Maybe we should watch that one of these days.
I would love it. He makes me laugh so hard. I also work with Leslie Nielsen.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. What a sweetheart. Just a very sweet guy, but he always carried a whoopee cushion with him.
Oh my goodness.
Always had that, so we'd put it down so somebody would sit on it. Whatever, not sit up, but he would make the sound and stuff, whatever he would do. He always had
I gotta tell you something about whoopee cushions. I opened up for Robert Goulet in Rochester in February, Rochester, New York. The coldest, it was like the worst dinner theater. It's like you got very old people eating dinner and you're doing stand-up. I'm with Kathy Ladman, and it was, we were together for a few years. And, I meet him backstage opening night, and all of a sudden you grow up from seeing, Robert Goulet and the movies at Broadway and, Merv and Mike Douglas and every show, all TV shows. And then he's a big, big name. And all of a sudden he's farting up a storm. Like the second I'm meeting him and he's squinting. And it's Robert Goulet and he has a whoopee cushion like behind his back.
Oh, that's hysterical. That's
So funny.
That is really funny. What did you work with Leslie Nielsen on? A TV or a movie or?
We did take a special, like a one-shot special of sort of like a DC Follies, the same puppets and all the other stuff. And it was I forget what the premise was. We did a show with him, an hour show, and he was wonderful. It's really, but something, you're not in awe of many people because we come up in this business, The reason I was in awe of him. I don't know. He had this thing about him. I don't know what it was, but he was just really great. I mean, I'm not saying anything funny, but he was just an amazing.
I love him. The Naked Gun TV show was.
How about that scene when he plays the umpire?
Well, Police Squad, the original show too. It's just so brilliant.
Yeah,
Man, that was great.
Sorry to interrupt. We have to take another quick break, and we're back. Here's a question for you. Carson and Leno, from a comics point of view, what was the difference?
Yeah, everybody loved Carson. A lot of comics don't love Jay. I mean, I knew him. There's two different Jays. There's a Jay that's a club act and traveled the country, and he's a great comic.
And a great
The
guy,
Jay
too.
I did a sketch with him, but there's a Jay that is ultra competitive. I remember Seinfeld's 40th or 50th birthday, and everybody, did a little bit there. And Jay's heckling me. And I said, and I was doing like 3 minutes or whatever. I was goofing on Seinfeld style. Why do they call it the number 2 pencil? What does number 1 feel like? And, who's 3? I was doing a thing like that. And and all of a sudden, Leno's heckling me. And I stop. I go, Jay, you got an amazing career. You're known worldwide. You've been the host of The Tonight Show for 20 years, and you need to heckle me? You really need to heckle me at Jerry's birthday party? Jay, I think, is just ultra, ultra, ultra competitive. I think in the comedy world, he and Jay kind of were he and Jerry were like the co-kings of comedy from our generation. I would say Larry's way, way, way up there. But as far as visibility and seizing that and wanting it, I think, and being very talented, there was nothing like Carson.
He had a double thing going with Jay, though. Jay, I remember I was sitting with him at a table at the Improv shortly, maybe a year or so after, or 2 years after he did Tonight. Not did it, but was hosting. The show became his. He was looking at this one comic wanted to give him a video of his set. And he gave him the video, and the guy left, and Jay says to me, I don't know, these people, they think because they weren't very good in the beginning, they're going to be good now. And I'm thinking, yes, that's how people do. They change. In the beginning, they aren't very good. They get better. But he had such a disdain. And I think it was part of maybe he was getting pestered by so many people. I don't know what it was.
What I will say is,
he's a nice guy. I still think he's a really nice guy.
I wouldn't agree with you on that. I guess it depends on your experience with him. It's okay if somebody say so-and-so is all about so-and-so. But Jay is like crazy about Jay, I think.
It was not right, him heckling you like that. He should have slapped you.
Right.
He should have got up.
Yeah, nowadays, right. You
Back me like Will Smith. But no, the other thing I would say about Jay is Jay made it from all these appearances on Tonight Show and Letterman mainly. Those two were launching points. And that Jay did not in turn launch anybody that we know of unless they were like the dancing Edos. The one great thing about Carson is he had such joy in people succeeding.
Yes.
And Jay, you never got that from Jay. And to me, that's a very telling legacy, sadly. You can't say the talent wasn't out there.
No, it's always.
So it's there. And then you look at Letterman on the other side. Letterman had people on, listen, may he rest in peace, John Witherspoon. It's like the material gets thin after a while. But he was a friend of his. They started together. There were many people like that. He was like wanting to help his friends, help other comics. And that said something or a lot about.
He was like Richard Lewis's career.
Yes.
I remember when Lewis started getting Lettermans, he kept telling me how he was so unbelievably happy he was using him, and it changed his career.
I think David Letterman revived Jay Leno's career. I watched the whole CNN history of late night, and the way they played it out is Leno had pretty much was done. Like the Tonight Show wasn't having him back, nothing. But he kept killing on the Letterman show.
Yeah. And
then he parlayed that back into the Tonight Show guesting, and then eventually robbing David Letterman of his dreams.
Well, I think, something, everything worked out well because CBS, I thought it was a great fit. Letterman and CBS in New York. So probably would have, because he was very talented, would have done well if he did take over the Tonight Show. I finally watched that Late Shift movie, which was on like YouTube. I watched it while working out, like right there on my spin bike. Watched a couple of days. I watched that.
They kicked Johnny out. I know that story because I was friends with Jim McCauley.
Yeah.
McCauley was the talent coordinator at the Tonight Show, and good friends with Jim. I did a lot of work with different things with him. And Jim told me, he said that Carson wanted to stay on.
Oh, he did.
But they had higher ratings when the younger guys took over the show.
Yeah.
So NBC actually pushed Carson out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that Helen Kushnick helped with that too. I just watched The Late Shift also, Steve. I watched it not too long ago.
Yeah.
I'm a big Betty Thomas fan. It was a good thing. I loved seeing Rich Little. I hadn't seen him in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, yeah. Talented. He and David Fry were the two guys, and Frank Gorshin, the three impressionists that were amazing.
Gilbert Fry did the best. Lyndon
Nixon
Johnson.
and Johnson. Oh, yeah. I wrote an album for him. Did you know that with Billy and I?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we wrote an album for him, but it never got sold. He had a really bad drinking problem, and he was really sick.
We're up the show halfway through for him to go pee, something
He would
like
show a little film of a Nixon kind of spoof film while he would run to the bathroom halfway through. Yeah.
Tricks of the trade.
Steve, were you in Rodney's dressing room when he would ever come in? He would come in between shows. He would wear a robe with nothing on. And then he would sit and talk to you when he'd pee in the sink.
Yeah, I know. And his balls would be flowing.
Pee in the
Throw
sink.
it out of that robe. I know. It's so, yeah.
His philosophy of life, he told me, John, I'll tell you my philosophy of life. He said, hey, one day you think you have the perfect blowjob. He said, you realize a week later, you want another one that's better.
Everyone talks about Rodney's generosity and eventually his balls. That is a constant theme.
Yeah. And the hookers. John, you want to get a hooker? Come on, I'll get you a hooker. I'll pay for it. Come on, I'll pay for it. I say, no, Rod.
Well, that actually happened with Larry, with
it happened many
David
times
Fry
with him.
and Billy and I. And I said, no, I can't. I couldn't handle it. I just left. Very different times.
Steve, I wanted to ask you about Extreme Makeover. Well, it was more like just putting your body through that. I mean, you look amazing.
It should be called Extreme Makeover Work in Progress because it took about 3 months. I'm glad I did it. As long as I look better than John, I'm happy. John set a high bar, and I said, no way. I cannot live the rest of my life.
You had problems, though. Didn't you have to go back or something because you exercised?
Oh, that was only on my eye. I actually had my third eye straightened. That was interesting. But I had a strabismus surgery. This guy, Arnold Rosenbaum or Bloom, I forget already. It's 17 years ago. And
wow.
He would do kids like lazy eye, they call it, but strabismus surgery. And I was exercising too much after, and they had to forget my right eye or my left eye. In both eyes, I had it done. So, but I'm glad I did it. I was doing all the self-deprecating material, and I did it, for like 20-something years. And it was like I was turning 49 during the process of makeover. Certainly, I was like burnt out. I said, something, this is going to shake me up. And, I'm just about 50 and, maybe this is a sign that it's okay to do. It'll force me to do different material and kind of get outside of the self-deprecating material. And anyway, so that's what I did. I had the opportunity. I got an email one day and I'm familiar with the show. I'd seen it, I was married around that time and then we split up. I remember watching it with my wife at the time. And I said, no, these people are very brave. And, who knew I was going to meet 20 people going through the process. But I got an email one day going, hey, I'm an agent. I'm in the Midwest. And they're putting it out there. I thought you were right for this.
That's yeah. I think you need to get your face.
What kind of compliment is that? Like, hey, really, you're a great candidate for this. And then I ran it by everybody. I ran it by going, oh, look at you, jump on it. It's like I still had to fill out, literally 40 pages of forms and, get approval and my family approval. And, you don't mess around. My brother didn't agree to it, John.
I'm serious already. You need to ask your brother and
you have to get approval. You want to make sure you're literally, before you do get the makeover, you go through hours upon hours of psychological testing, meet therapists. Really? Yeah, you go through a hell of a screening for that. I thought because of my credits that I went, this is kind of a real win-win. It's a coup for them because I'm sort of known. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, we're giving a makeover to comedian Steve Mittleman. And yeah, it done 100 TV shows, 50 commercials, a bunch of movies, some sitcoms. So it's, to me, that had some visibility. There was one other comic that it was down to the wire between he and I.
Oh, really?
I thought very confidently that based on my credits that I would be the one picked, and I was the one picked. So
wow. It's
a weird experience, but it was very good.
So I'm guessing you did not mention the hanging out at the mental institution story.
Yeah, that's very funny.
Very funny. So yeah, it was a very unique I will tell you, and I don't know if John knows the story, that it's like $100,000 worth of surgery. They don't want you to be seen by anybody. They want to be the ones that launch you. They're like, the big surprise, hey, this is what you look like now. They want to do that. So a couple of things. One, I had split up with this girlfriend. And so my other good friends, since starting in comedy, like also like John, like 45 years, Billy Reback and Tom Stern, they kind of like, I set up a meal with them. And because I was like, going, I just split up with her, but it was my choice, but I split up with her. And, they took me out for dinner somewhere and I was not supposed to be seen by anybody. Somehow in this restaurant, this Italian restaurant, Anna's, I think it's called, on Pico in LA, somebody from the production office from ABC saw me there and called the executive. I had like 3 screaming phone messages in the old days with answering machines. 3 screaming messages from the executive producer. We're going to sue you. I mean, I had to talk them down the next day. Crazy. I wrote a letter of apology. Please understand. I just split up with somebody and my friends were being very nice. And so I kind of saved my face, not my ass, but I saved my ass, my face.
Seems like an extreme overreaction they had.
Oh, on their part, yes, because it's not like I was going to bleed out into oh my God, Steve Mittleman had a makeover. Nobody was going to do that.
Plus, what was going to happen? Someone's going to take your picture. It ends up in the newspaper a week later. It's not like today.
Yeah, it was such an overreaction on their part. And my friends were just doing me a favor. But I think it's an interesting story. So
it's a great story. Great story.
The other thing is, last thing, I know I'm chewing up time here, but so the show airs. Literally, I probably got 50 emails, like probably 50 phone calls, like the night of the show. And the next morning I was flying out to Florida, but I was recognized more from the Extreme Makeover than any other TV show I ever did.
Wow.
I walk on board the plane. I was going to a gig and the flight attendants go, "Oh my God, we saw you last night. Congratulations. Good for you." And I'm walking down the aisle, people are pointing, "Hey, good for you, Steve. Congratulations." I sit down and take off. And then the flight attendant, she's moving the drink cart along, taking the drink orders. And she spots me and goes, "Hey, congratulations. Good for you. You look great." And, the woman next to me, she knows nothing, obviously. And she puts down her magazine. She says, "Well, got to ask you, what's all this congratulations about?" And I said, "Well, I just got Extreme Makeover." And I swear to you, she looks me up and down and says, "That is so fabulous. So when do you start?" I swear to you, that's a true story.
Oh, man.
Very funny. I can believe it.
That is funny.
Yeah.
What?
A classic. Yeah.
That is classic. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me. This was so much fun. Thank you guys.
Great. It was fun for me, but now I have to deal with John's ego.
I know. John's ego is the worst.
I'm going to put this on to you, Steve, real quickly.
Yeah.
I'm going to just start it. There's the thing me and Steve do we started out with the fake feud, whatever, and everything, and then we got built to everything is Middleman's fault. It's Middleman's fault. And we have this group text, and I'm going to let you finish it. Myself, Neil DiRaldo, the guitar player, Pat Benatar's husband and the guitar player, writes the songs and stuff. Brian Caron, who's a news guy from CNN and a bunch of different stuff, and a former guy, FBI.
White House press pool for like 40 years.
We started doing the Middleman's fault on this group text. So it's Middleman's fault. It's Middleman's fault. Brian picked it up. He's with the press pool, the White House. Now you take it away.
Brian's he walks into CNN. He's on the phone with John and they're making fun of me. Brian's emphatic. They go, "It's Middleman's fault." Like some terrible tragedy happens in the world. Anything that somebody can be blamed, he and John especially, Middleman's fault. But this whole text, it's Middleman's fault. So one of the executive producers of some show that he's going on Don Lemon or something, and he hears this.
Perhaps the mic went out or something, and Brian yelled out, "It's Middleman's fault."
And then Brian explains what we just explained to you. And the guy goes, "Oh, yeah, I love that guy. I'm a fan of his," which is very sweet. You don't know who knows you, right? In show business, you don't know who knows you. Like a few weeks later, there's another incident at CNN. Light goes out, a mic goes out, and this producer goes to Brian, "It's Middleman's fault." Okay, now it's starting to catch on. Now, weeks later, Brian's going into the White House the West Wing's security in the White House. And at that moment, a guy hops the fence, which Ryan has told us happens more often than we know, and is running toward the White House, right? They're going to make a higher fence, I think. So anyway, Brian had been telling it's Middleman's fault to the security service at the White House. And the one guy was a fan of mine, another guy, explains it to him who I am and why they call me that. It's Middleman's fault. And this guy's, I jumped the punchline, but a guy is running toward the White House, and Brian hears through the Secret Service sound system, he's at security, he hears these words, "We have a Middleman situation."
And then months later, again, there was a problem, and it became a catchword for
I became a buzz lingo.
Something goes wrong in the White House now. You will hear with the Secret Service. We have a Middleman situation here.
That's amazing. We have a Middleman situation right here. My Zoom time's running out.
That's right. Oh yeah, we have a minute to go. Okay.
I appreciate you guys so much. This was so much fun. I know we could probably go on for hours, but so many great stories. I can't thank enough for sharing them with me.
Of course, if you want to send flowers in honor of the passing of John's humor, great. But no, we have so much fun with each other, and we have our fake feud is a lot of fun. Maybe we've done a drop of it here, but we do endless fake feud with each other, but it's all because we hate each other.
Middleman's fault. Just end on it's Middleman's fault.
Well,
He's got to go.
John. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun, Jeff. Anytime.
All right, everyone. One more time for Steve Mittleman and John DeBellis. That much hilarity in one episode has never happened before. May never happen again. They were awesome, weren't they? So many great stories. Loved everyone. Can't believe the interview's over. That means episode 301 now complete. Again, huge thank you to Steve Mittleman and John DeBellis. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.